All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, we're going to be reviewing Stephen King's Hearts in Atlantis. Came out in 1999. Now, we always review the covers first. I always have a hardcover. I've got every Stephen King book in hardcover. I've got every Stephen King book in paperback. So we always review, contrast, and compare. Well, the hardcover version and the paperback version got the same exact cover. So, because we can't contrast and compare. What do I think about the cover? You know, I love graphic design and illustration. I think this cover is adequate. I think it's all right. It gets, we know it's a Stephen King novel. We've got the little poster of the missing animal, the missing cat, which plays a big part in the story. So anyway, I've got a little bit of before we get to the review, I want to tell you a little personal story about me and this book. So, in 1999, I married someone when I was in college. I was only married for about 4 or 5 years, and then I got divorced. And sort of as my divorce present to myself, I bought a new house. In 1999, I'm still living in the same house. It's a townhouse, so, it is what it is. But I was super excited to buy the house. And this book came out in 1999 at the same time. Now, normally, Stephen King books, I buy them the day they come out, and I read them the day they come out. But I held on to this one. I bought this one, and I hadn't quite closed on the house yet. There was about a 3-month delay in the closing before I could move into the house. So this month, I wanted this book to be the very first book that I read in my new house. And so I waited about 3 months after buying it before I finally moved into my new house. And then I sat down and I read my Stephen King book, my favorite author, in my brand new house. No furniture, nothing but empty walls and empty. I didn't own anything but for the house and my book collection. And I read this. So this book always holds a very special place in my heart, because it was the first book that I ever read in this house that I still own to this day, 22 years later. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about it. I have been reviewing every Stephen King novel in order of publication on my channel. We are now to Hearts in Atlantis. So we're a good way into it. We're like 2/3 of the way through the list. And I've also been listening to each book on audible.com, reading along I read along with the Audible narration. This one was read by the actor William Hurt, and he did a great job of reading this book on Audible. So thumbs up. What is this book about? This book is 5 interconnected stories that tell a full novel. In fact, a lot of people would say, well, this is just 5 novellas by Stephen King. I say, yes, you're right. It is 5 novellas by Stephen King. But I consider it a whole novel in and of itself, because all of the novellas build off of each other, and they all contain the same characters and the same storyline and everything like that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to read you page 40 of this book. I don't often read out of books, but I wanted to read page 40 because there is a passage in here that says everything that I love about Stephen King. And this is the passage. So, book 1 is called Low Men in Yellow Coats, and it's about this kid living in the 60s. And this book is Stephen King's love letter to the 60s. I mean, let's just get that out right at the beginning. This is about the Vietnam War and every pop culture reference about the 60s. And it's not only a love letter from Stephen King to the 60s, but it's a love letter about baseball and a love letter to all of the old pulp science fiction novels that Stephen King probably read when he was a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s. And so we get a lot of that reference in here. And this is one of the things that I love about Stephen King is this is why we love Stephen King writing. I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs here that say it all. By the time he got to Commonwealth Park, Bobby's resentment had faded, and the word cheapskate had left his brain. It was a beautiful day, and he had a terrific book to finish. How could you be resentful and pissed off with stuff like that going on when you had a good book? He found a secluded bench and reopened Lord of the Flies. He had to finish it today, and he had to find out what happened. The last 40 pages took him an hour, and during that time he was oblivious to everything around him. When he finally closed the book, he saw he had a lap full of little white flowers. His hair was full of them too. He had been sitting unaware in a storm of apple blossoms. What a picture that paints. We've all been there reading a great book. Even we've all been there reading a great Stephen King book, unaware of everything that happens around us. The next thing you know, we've got a lap full of apple blossoms in the middle of a storm. And we didn't even know we were in the middle of that storm because we were engrossed in our book. This is what Hearts in Atlantis is. This is a delicious book about everything Stephen King loves about life. You can just tell that he put everything he loves about the 60s and about his youth and about playing baseball and reading books and listening to music and everything, and the Vietnam War and the fear that they all felt back then. This is a love letter to Stephen King's youth. Everything that you loved about It, you know, those kids in It, you can find it in here in Bobby and his friends. And so the first novella, Low Men in Yellow Coats. What's a low man in a yellow coat? Well, it's just a stupid guy, really. But Bobby sees these low men in yellow coats. You know, they're like these supernatural. I mean, it's very, very... there's always like a weird supernatural twist to every Stephen King story. Book number 2, or novella number 2, is called actually Hearts in Atlantis. And it's about college kids. Now, this all takes place in Connecticut. And I've lived in Connecticut, so I appreciated that Stephen King finally stepped out of Maine and put a story in Connecticut. And so that's another good thing, because I'm familiar with Bridgeport and New Haven and all of these places that the story takes place. So I love that about it too. So Hearts in Atlantis is the next story, and it's about these college kids that get way too involved in their card game, and things go wacky and wackadoo. But they also at the same time learn that there's the Vietnam War that they hate, and that maybe they should protest. And so that's kind of the second novella. The third novella, Blind Willie, and the fourth novella is called... The third novella is called Blind Willie. The fourth novella is called Why We're in Vietnam. Now, the first novella takes place in the early 60s. The second novella takes place in the late 60s. And the Blind Willie and Why We're in Vietnam take place kind of in the early 70s. And it goes back to the town that Billy grew up in, but some of the adults that were in Billy's original story, Low Men in Yellow Coats, now we get to see that same town through the eyes of the adults, and it gets a little creepy again. And then the very last story is I can't remember the name of it, but something about the nights are falling. Something about heaven and the nights falling. I should just look that shit up. You know, it's probably in the book. Apologize for this. We're gonna get it. You can tune out now if you don't want to know. It's I apologize. I should have written this down. Heavenly Shades of Night Are Falling. I finally found it, and it ties all the other books together, and baseball and this magical baseball glove. And I loved the ending. It really almost brought a tear to my eye. It's just a magical ending, much like Shawshank Redemption. This is one of Stephen King's better efforts. I really, 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 really liked this. This book, Hearts in Atlantis, will always have a special place in my heart. Now, as you know, every book that I write be it Forgetting Moon or Blackest Heart, is dedicated to Stephen King, Motley Crue, and the Oakland Raiders, because those were the three most important things to me when I was a kid. Just like Stephen King had important things to him when he was a kid. So I dedicate every one of my novels to Stephen King, Motley Crue, and the Oakland Raiders. They always get a shout out and everything I write. And Hearts in Atlantis gets a 9.5 out of 10. I love this book.